Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Victor, one of your co-presenters. If you guys can hear me and can see me and can see my screen, if you could comment in the chat box and let us know that you are able to hear and see us. Elisa and I just had to have the troubleshooting experience of a lifetime right now trying to get this going. So
in the last 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So Lindsay, Cheryl, Charlene,
Thank you,
Lindy,
Lindsay.
Caitlin, everybody can hear and see us.
Thank you.
Awesome. 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 Awesome.
Well, the only fallout from that is that I can't use my headphones, so I won't use my headphone. That's all it takes. We'll keep rolling. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, Elaine.
All right.
All right. Well.
Hey, Elaine. Yeah, good to virtually know you're in the room. Awesome.
Yeah. Welcome.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Awesome. All right. So we've got. You want to wait another couple of seconds, Elisa, in case some other people join in, or you want to jump right in and get going with today and go through our resources for them?
Well, let's see. We've got people coming in the door.
Yes, Shelly,
Yes,
we got a question. I'm actually going to put the, there's a Padlet that has all of the resources. I'm going to drop that link into our chat box right now. And then in the first column here, you'll be able to download the PowerPoint. So let me go ahead and put that in our chat box real quick. I want all panelists and attendees. Awesome. Yep.
Okay, how's my sound on your end?
I can hear you good.
Because you sound like you're almost whispering, so I'm not touching anything. As long as you can hear me and I can hear your voice, I'll listen closely.
Yeah, I can hear you good. I can hear you just fine, yep.
Okay. Great, Kelly, thank you. The strange and wonderful world of technology. We're good though. We're good right now, so welcome. Well, let's see. Oh, cool. We got 50 in the room.
All right.
Well, do you want to start, or do you want, we're going to start again with the puppy scale?
Yeah, let's see how people are feeling today. So we've got since we're talking about behavior here, right? We've got a little pre-assessment to see how you guys are feeling today. I would say, there we go. So I would say I started off feeling, I was at about a 3 this morning, ready to go. And then Zoom started to act up, so I went to about a 2. Now I'm back to about a 4, like, let's get ready to do this. So if you guys could comment in the chat box and let us know how you guys are feeling today.
About this pending conversation. Oh, Lindsay, thank you. I'm with you. I'm a 4 too. I'm like, let's do this.
Shelly's a 2.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty.
Honesty. Elaine, I'm at a 2. It's been stressful at work. I hear that.
Yeah, I passed through that. You know what? Stressful is not even close to describing it. Thanks for being here. Somebody's still asleep. Who said that?
Yeah, Kelly's still asleep. Kelly's still asleep. Sherry started with students today, and she's in the virtual room. Oh my goodness! Kudos to you for being here. Wow.
Fantastic. Loving the dogs. Yeah, that's kind of fun. It's one way to kind of just, get the temperature of the room and see how we're doing this morning in kind of a novel way.
Yeah.
Oh, kids coming today. Wow. Oh, sorry. Since I can't, I'm going to have to put somebody in there in the back room since I can't use my headphones right now.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, she wanted to participate. She heard puppies. And
I know. She's looking at the screen.
Yeah.
She's at a 4 right now.
Yeah. Catherine, hope you feel better. Oh man. Thank you for being here with us today, though, even though you're not feeling good. So we got Nicole's at a 4. Awesome. Awesome. Wait about another couple of seconds here. Let's see. We got a couple more. We got another
Okay.
4.
My dog has been banished to her kennel now, so she's back down to a 1. She is not happy with me.
You went from a 4 to a 1, just like that. Like, come on,
I just
Mom. You said
took all the air out
puppies.
of the room. Okay, well, as you continue to do that, I'm going to just welcome you all here because we're going to have some good conversation today. Thanks for taking the time away from wherever you are, however you're working with young people and teachers and families. Thank you for doing that and for taking some time to be with us. We're going to talk about behavior today. And in the chat, I know Victor's already thrown in some information about how to get to our Padlet. We'll continue to put that in, or that's the royal we. He'll continue to put that in. I'm doing good to be in front of the screen. If you don't already know who we are, I'm Elisa Stovall. I've been with the Resource Center for quite some time, and I love talking about behavior and figuring out puzzles and finding ways to support you in the field. And that's what we're going to do today. My colleague, Victor Torres, I'll let you introduce yourself here.
Yeah, my name is Victor Torres. I'm also a consultant with the Indiana IEP Resource Center. I'm one of the newer consultants this summer, made a year. Flew by, wow.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a year.
You're an old new guy now.
I am.
I'm just an old one.
Yeah, so I too enjoy talking about behavior. I was my majority of my teaching experience was as a ED teacher at the elementary level and then at the secondary level. So yeah, so I like talking about behavior. It gives me good memories, and sometimes I'm like, woo. Elisa and I have had some conversations where it just takes us back down memory lane, and we're like, wow, man, we had quite some experiences there. So I'm looking forward to our time together today, and yeah, I'll pass it back to Elisa, and I'll go ahead and get back to our PowerPoint. And
okay, we'll put the puppies away for right now, but hopefully we'll have time to come back to them at the end and see what's going on. So right. We do have some outcomes for our time together today, and they're only two, but we hope that they'll be meaningful to you. First, depending on where you are in the learning curve of behavior intervention plans, some of you are more seasoned than I am, others are newer than I am, but we're all going to have this conversation. So it might be a learning curve for you today. It might just be a review of the process today. And we'll attach it relatively to the IEP system because we support that program too. So there may be some places where we point out what's going on in the system in relation to this process. But more importantly is to expand your collection of behavior intervention resources. We want to grow your resources for you today. And that should be our #1 goal, so that you have some things to go to and to use as part of your repertoire of skills. The next slide is just a reminder for us as we start our conversation today. Everything that we discuss, everything that is within the realm of the work that we do in schools is with one thing in mind. It's really that ultimate goal of assisting students in building skills to reach their final destination with us, which is launching into the real world or out into the world away from pre-K-12 schools onto whatever the next step is for them. And we want them to successfully navigate the pieces that they get with us so that they can continue to successfully navigate the world around them. So we're talking about building skills, and it's always in the context of teaching and learning, at least for us in this gathering today. And to that end, the next slide is just kind of a reminder. We're all in this place where we know what is effective in regards to educating students. We've got a lot of research, we've got a lot of information out there that can really point us towards, these are the things that we do so that learning is sticky and so that it stays with those that we're teaching. The predictability, explicit instruction, you've heard these terms before. The relevance to real life, it matters. Having time for learners to get in and explore concepts and really grow into the skills that we want them to have and own. That fidelity of instruction and then meaningful feedback. It doesn't change just because we're talking about behavior. Those are all parts of what we do whenever we're teaching and learning. And I want you to be reassured that you've got this. You've got this. Our work with students in learning behavioral skills and expectations is really the same. And you can go ahead and flip to that next slide. The goals are the same. We may feel more competent and confident teaching an academic skill, reading, math, social studies, science, but we still do the same things as we stretch that instruction over our learners. When I was teaching regrouping to some of my students early on, I used that graph paper, that grid paper, so that they could align their numbers, because that was important to them, and that was important to the skill. When I'm teaching a student around a behavioral area, I have to set the environment so that they're going to be successful, so that they can learn what it is that I think is critical for them to know next in the progression of that skill. We do that all the time in our academic areas. We're less confident sometimes in doing that in the behavioral areas, but it really is very similar. And you've got this. You have the skill set, or you're expanding your skill set to do this. Got a question there about the presentation and the Padlet. Yeah, everything should be there for you. And again, ask questions if you can't see what you need to see. So there are two parts to this process that we're going to take a look at and dive into for a little bit. Two distinct processes. The first, when we're talking about addressing a behavioral concern for a student, it's finding out the why. We need to have a well-informed hypothesis. So we're going to do a deep dive. It's not about my opinion, what I think is happening. I may have some information to bring to that discussion, but we want to go through a process that gives us a really well-informed why this behavior, why in this place, why at this time. That can help us develop a plan. And I started calling it recently reshaping the student's learning scape, so that we can just, something's not connecting, something's not helping the student learn the skills that they need to have to be in our space successfully. So it may be intentionally planning, again, for that opportunity for success. And that's what our behavior intervention plan actually becomes, because we want to lead those students to that final destination. So we're going to use our teaching skills to do that. And having said that, Victor, I think I've spoken enough for the last few minutes. You want to jump in with where we start?
All right. So I will take us through the first part of this two-part process that Elisa discussed, right? So when we talk about developing a behavior plan and even working with our students in general, right, it always starts with a team approach. And it should look to continue as a team approach and end as a team approach, right? So we don't want it to be where we have, there's an administrator or a teacher of record or just district leadership who's calling the shots for a particular student, right? We want to make sure that it's a nice group of teachers, staff members, administrators, just a multidisciplinary group of people who have, or staff members who have a variety of experiences with that student across multiple settings, right? So if we have, just maybe there's an aide or a particular teacher that has a good rapport with the student, ensuring that they're a part of that process to really highlight some of those strengths. Of course, this team is called our Case Conference Committee, right? CCC team members. And of course, the team is also in charge with, documenting decisions and actions in the NIEP, and also ensuring that they are following the reevaluation timelines and guidelines. So there are some duties that they have that come with being a part of the Case Conference team. So we want to give you guys about a brief 10 seconds here real quick. And if you got a piece of paper, or if you have a Google Doc opened up, or Microsoft Word document that you're typing some notes or writing some notes, jot down briefly for me, who's on your team? Who are you typically including in your team? And I'm sure you guys are like brains are like, yeah, absolutely, you know, case conference committee team members, but who's a part of your team? I'll give you guys about 5 seconds here just to reflect or jot down on a sticky note. Who's on your team? All right. So I'm sure a lot of you guys had a lot of the members here on the left listed on the left side of your screen, right? So you got your teacher of records, your teacher of service, administrators, maybe district administrators, definitely family, right? Some of us for our behavior kids, right? We may have a behavior specialist or maybe social workers, school psych who may help with evaluations. But did you guys consider any of the people that just showed up on the right side of your screen? I'll give you a brief second to just kind of look through those. And, you know, the reason that we highlight some of these is, you know, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes, you know, we fail to incorporate somebody who really knows the student, somebody who could come into the process and really highlight some of their strengths. Sometimes, you know, it's when we have a student who's struggling, it's really easy to highlight, okay, Victor's struggling with this, with that. He's having a hard time in math, in gym, after school. But maybe there's somebody who has seen a really positive side of that student. Maybe there's a coach who has seen, you know, that Victor has strong leadership skills on the court or on the football field, or maybe Victor's a part of chess club and you should see the way he interacts when he's in a different setting outside of the classroom. So we really want to ensure that when we are putting our team together, that we are having somebody who really has, you know, a good positive rapport with the student that can highlight some of those positive aspects and strengths that sometimes get missed when we're talking about students who may be struggling in the, you know, in the school setting. So taking you back, and as Elisa mentioned earlier, you know, we're going to highlight some sections of the IEP. And as you see on your screen, I'm sure all of you are familiar with this tab right here, right? You got your little toggle menu with your drop down, and this is where it all starts, right? We're identifying a behavior of concern. Yes, there is a behavior of concern for the case conference committee to discuss. And then you get this little rectangle here where you can kind of type a description of the behavior of concern, describe what the observer is seeing, what does it look like, where does the behavior occur, where does the behavior not happen, right? So we want to make sure that as we're filling out this process that we're being as descriptive as possible. However, there sometimes seems to be a bit of a misconception, and sometimes we're not all on the same playing field when we're talking about identifying behaviors of concern. So I want to give you another brief reflection moment, right? As a staff with your team, with your case conference committee team, with your school-based leadership teams, with just your school in general, are we all talking about behavior in the same kind of way? Are we collectively labeling behaviors in the same way? Have we identified critical behaviors worthy of a discipline referral? I'll give you a brief second to reflect there, because I'm sure some of you guys are like, ooh, I don't know, Victor. Julie, yes, the PowerPoint is in your Padlet. It's in the Padlet. You know what? I'm going to exit out of present mode here. And if the Padlet link is in the chat box, when you go to the Padlet, it'll be the very first column here. If you click on it, hover over it, click on it, it'll allow you to open in a new window, or you can download it directly to your screen right there. So here's the PowerPoint presentation. As Elisa and I get going through the rest of the content, we're going to reference some specific documents. So they're going to be in your training handouts here. There's an activity that we're going to do that's called a data dive. Yep, no worries, Julie. And those documents will be here. And then there's a couple of other resources that'll be in the other resources tab. But going back to our content, right? And I know when Elisa and I were talking about this particular slide here, you know, she mentioned, and it definitely brought me back to thinking when I was in teaching, right? As an ED teacher, a hit was very, sometimes a hit, slap, touch, tap was very different compared to some of my general ed colleagues, right? Oh yeah, Victor just wailed on that kid. Yeah, that doesn't look like you know, what's being sure that we're collectively labeling behaviors of concern and really having a clear and concise way of just really highlighting and ensuring that we're talking about what's worthy of a discipline referral. So Going back to that Padlet, there's an awesome resource that we found with NCII, and that's the National Center of Intensive Intervention. It's in your other resources tab. And this document here, I really wish I would have had it when I was teaching, because I definitely would have brought this to my administrators and would have went through it with my colleagues, with my co-teachers, with the general ed teachers that I was working with. And what it does, it just kind of gives you, it's just a one-page document, and it really asks you to record 5 behaviors that occur in your school that are commonly viewed as problems. So you list these behaviors, and then as a team, right, you could do it separately or do it together as a group. You write a definition for each of the following behaviors using objective and measurable language. So now, instead of everybody thinking, okay, what is really defiant? What does that really look like? What does it mean that in this example here, right, Connie is constantly being uncooperative, right? Uncooperative may be head down, not paying attention, but to Lisa, that may not be, well, maybe Victor just needs a break, right? So just ensuring using these resources to just kind of have a consensus amongst your team to really be able to identify behaviors of concern, because it'll just help you with just making informed decisions, not only for specific students with IEPs, but also just as a general for your students. So I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. And once we are able to identify, once we're all talking about behaviors of concern in the same common language, the next step is to really identify, when we're talking with our students with IEP perhaps, or we're having behavior concerns, what really rises to the level of bringing that behavior of concern to the team. So here are some considerations on what may really rise to the level of it being a true behavior of concern. So removes the student from instruction, no longer a part of the lesson, no longer a part of the classroom, being removed from that instruction. Is it harmful or dangerous to the student or others? Is it isolating that student from others, that now they're not a part of that general education experience where they can interact with their peers and their gen ed teachers and counterparts? Is it regularly interrupting instruction? Or is it pulling that student away from themselves and others and from the task? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our first activity. I'm going to read the directions, and then I'll take you to the Padlet and show you where those, where these resources will be. So we have a document, an FAQ document that our team put together, and it kind of just goes through what truly rises to the level of bringing that behavior to the team. So you're going to read that question along with it's just a one-pager. You're going to read that document. And then there's another document that lists behaviors individually. So you'll have specific behaviors just listed. And then you're going to sort those behaviors into what might be a behavior of concern or what may not be a behavior of concern. And then we're going to come back together and share our thoughts, our rationale on some of those decisions. So going back to our Padlet, those 2 documents are going to be the first number 1 and number 2 of your Padlet. So the second column here, training handouts, it's the first and the second document. So the first one looks like this. What's a behavior of concern? Again, you can click download. Once you hover over, you can download or open in a new window. So you're going to read this one-pager here on what would truly be, what really rises to a behavior of concern that's worthy of documenting in the IEP. And then the second document that you're going to look at is potential behaviors of concern. So here you will have a list of behaviors. There's 10 of them. Oh, no, I lied to you guys. 12 of them. Sorry, I didn't scroll down all the way. And then you're going to you can write it on a piece of paper, you could print it out, you could just make a note on it, make a mental note if you're typing in a Google Doc. You're going to say, yes, this rises to behavior of concern. Would you consider this a behavior of concern? No, or maybe there may be some maybes. You're like, I don't know. Maybe it's worthy of a conversation with some of my colleagues, right? So we're going to give you guys about 3 to 4 minutes, about the length of one song. Once that song is done, then we'll come back together and we will debrief. As you guys are working through these documents and reading, if you have some ideas, feel free to start dropping those responses in the chat box. So for example, as you're working, if you think absolutely number 1, number 3, and number 5 are definite behaviors of concern, go ahead and just type us a quick sentence. Or if you want to elaborate on one, like I think number 1 is a behavior of concern, or number 1 may be because, and then tell us what you're thinking, all right? So I'm going to leave this Padlet here, and I'm going to go ahead and play a tune for you guys. And once the song is done, then we know we are going to come back together as a group, all right? So here we go. Hopefully you guys hear my audio. Right, guys, we're going to go ahead and come back together as a group, and we'll give you about a minute or so if you guys want to go ahead and share any of your responses. I'll go ahead and go back to our Padlet and pull up that document for us here. I'll go ahead and open in a new window. So were there any behaviors of concern that you were like, absolutely home run, that's definitely a behavior of concern, or any that were like, probably not, I don't think so? Or are there any that you were like, I think this would be of good discussion with our team to see, you know, what really rises to the a behavior being of concern?
Okay, you've got a couple of comments. One says, depending on the student, they could all be behaviors of concern. The second comment is number 5 for sure. Teacher sees evidence of cutting behavior. You know, that might rise immediately. That should probably immediately to the top.
I see Catherine mentioned something that her admin had her write a blip on a student. Oh man, that's
Yeah,
that's
well,
tough. Yeah.
but that pattern piece makes a difference. If there's no pattern, can we move forward? Again, that's a discussion to have. There's no absolute yes, absolute no. If it's a behavior that a one for that just is so big that yeah, we've got to address this. That may be the case,
Right.
but it's always that's why there's safety in teams.
Yeah. Absolutely. Number
Someone else added
7,
a
could
comment.
2 hide during fire drills? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
lived that
There's.
one. Yeah, that's a concern. Yeah. The fire marshal was not happy with us that day.
We'll wait about another 10 seconds here in case somebody's typing in the chat box, and then we'll go back to our content. But again, these are some conversations that I wish I would have had with my team, right? There were some times where there was no pattern, as Lisa mentioned, or maybe to me, a student cursing, maybe he's just having a rough go that day, right? It's maybe there's no pattern there. Maybe that's just Victor hasn't learned how to just, so yeah, it's definitely worthy of conversation with your team. So we've got a couple other comments here. All of them, Cheryl, because they're interfering with some learning. Okay.
Physically fighting.
Fighting, way to school could lead to interpersonal relationships. Problems throughout the day. Yep. Oh no, Sherry. All right. Chat box is not updating. Sherry, maybe try logging out and then coming back in. Maybe it'll just refresh. Elisa and I had to do it about 3 times before we got everything going today. Our Zoom's just not ready to rock and roll this morning. Maybe give that a shot. Maybe it'll all refresh for you.
Or
Sorry
close
about
the
that.
chat and reopen. That's about all I know to do. I'm limited knowledge in that regard.
So thank you guys for participating in this first activity. I'm gonna go ahead and go back to our PowerPoint and move us through the next few slides here. So next steps, right? When we're talking about describing a behavior of concern. So going back to the IEP process, we would have this screen here, this area where, yes, there's a behavior of concern for the case conference committee to discuss. And then again, really being ensure that when you're describing that behavior of concern, you really want to be as clear and concise as possible in this description, in that, if somebody's observing the behavior, or they can automatically know, yes, that's the behavior of concern. This is the behavior of concern we're talking about with Victor. Being descriptive enough that they can act out that behavior and show you exactly what it looks like. We don't want there to be any gray area per se. We want to be very clear and concise. Where does it happen? What does it look like? Where is it not happening? Can we absolutely predict, yes, when X, Y, Z happens, this is when it's going to occur. So again, being very, very, very descriptive as possible with this section here. As Elisa and I were putting this content together over the summer, we were really looking at ways to just make this as engaging in person and virtually as possible, right? So we came across this young fella named Jeff that we found him, again, with NCII. They have a ton of awesome resources, and we decided to adapt this Jeff case study scenario to our PD to kind of just give you guys a case study or somebody to walk through the process with. So anytime you see our good fella Jeff here on the PowerPoint, there's going to be some kind of activity or tie-in that's going to bring us back to the Jeff case study. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to briefly just highlight our buddy Jeff here, and just to kind of give you, just to everybody to be on the same playing field when we're talking about Jeff. So we have a young guy here named Jeff who's appears to be having some difficulty paying attention in class. Okay. He's been inattentive and disruptive, and again, ensuring that we're all talking about, okay, what does disruption mean? What does inattentive look like, right? So the behaviors include him leaving his seat during work time. He's crumbling his paper. He's expressing some anger towards his peers and his teachers. Here we go. What we are most concerned about is that Jeff seems to be cursing and threatening his peers. These behaviors occur almost every day, sometimes in multiple classes. Some of the behaviors last only for a little while some of them can last several minutes. Okay, so we've got Jeff, he's cursing, he's threatening his peers. Some behaviors are short, some behaviors take some time. Let's see what else his other teachers are saying. So Jeff's classmates, okay, they typically ignore the behavior, although there are a few times, there's a couple of boys that seem to be making fun of him. They're whispering, they're giggling about him, they're making fun of his outbursts. So that can be, we're seeing now, not only Jeff is having struggles in the classroom, but it seems like he's having some socially, right? He's maybe not connecting as well with his peers. His teachers appear to be, most of the time, they're just ignoring his behavior and think it's just a part of his everyday routine. These behaviors have significantly impacted Jeff's ability to work and are also affecting his ability to get along with his peers. So again, we have seems like it's kind of like, we've got some information here. I don't know, some of you guys are thinking like, I don't know, Victor, that's not really clear. Maybe I need some more information. So let's see how this unfolds as we've worked through the rest of the PD. So again, whenever we see Jeff, we're going to kind of embed an activity to just kind of help us walk through the process just a little better. And again, just to make it more engaging for us. So I'm going ahead and pass the virtual microphone off to Elisa, and she's going to take us through the next couple of slides here, all right?
Okay, thanks. And before I forget, because you know I've got a very short window of retaining things like this, we might want to make sure the slide is in that large, you know, in the full slide state, so people, if they're looking on the screen, they can see it. I may have the oldest eyes looking at this, but that may just help in general with seeing the screen. So thanks, and maybe it's just me. So we have a behavior concern or a critical concern that we're kind of worried about, and there's a question that a case conference team would need to ask, and actually any team working with students would want to think through, you know, how serious is this? And legally, we're bound to do this for a student with an IEP, to think through, first, is there a pattern to this behavior? And the definition that we have developed, and you'll see it in the IEP system, is repeated occurrences of the behavior in one or more settings. Behaviors occur with a predictable series of triggers, for example, same time of the day or week. Sometimes it's the same time of the month or year. It can be a pattern that goes that long. Same environment or expectations. The same people are present or are absent. The same types of activities where the noise level is up, or the structure is different, or the level of independence makes an impact. But the whole idea of a pattern is the sameness. And sometimes we have to look for it. It's not right in front of us. So that's why, again, it's good to have others that either have observed or not observed this behavior, because then we can say, is there a pattern to this? Was it just a one kind of thing that happened? And there's a way to address that. But for the definitions that we're looking at to decide whether this is a behavior concern that we need to address through an IEP, the pattern of behavior is going to be important and a critical question to have, critical definition towards our question. The other one is impede. And in the system, you can see there's a brick wall there, that's pretty clear. To interfere with, or with the ability to participate in or focus on learning activities, because again, we're within the realm of learning. It could be the student's own personal learning, or it could be the learning of others. That can be just as important a piece to consider. So we have impede, and we have pattern of behavior that we need to address. Sometimes an impede can look like it draws a student off task. They start work, but then they can't stay focused. Sometimes it interferes with them to just get started at all. And sometimes it just interrupts that instructional flow. So again, there are different ways to kind of think through, is this really a behavior that's impeding? When we say yes, we've determined that the pattern of the student's behavior impedes his or her learning or that of others. And in the IEP system, there's a section on the next slide you'll see where we've highlighted, this is where we have to make that decision. And the team determines the answer to that. As much as I wanted to be in charge of things when I was an assistant principal and those behavioral things, it wasn't what Elisa thought, it was what the team thought about, is this a pattern that's impeding the student's behavior, impeding his or her learning or that of others. If we say no, we've documented this now, it's on the record that it came up, but it's not quite to that level yet. If we're not sure, maybe we need a little more information. We're not real clear whether there is a pattern to this. We can always consider behavioral support. And just, in the meantime, we're going to try something. So we're going to have a plan. And that may be making an adjustment to the environment for the student, a small environment. So for example, let's say we're going to change where James' locker is so that the pattern that he travels between classes is down a different hallway or with different students than he was with before. That may be all it takes to make that adjustment. We might consider, and go ahead and you can advance the slide some. So we've got our adjustments there. We might want to think about finding another way to get to the same outcome. Of late, we've been doing that quite a bit in our communities. Instead of pressing the button to get on the elevator, there are elevators where you can wave your hand and not touch them. And it still opens the door and it still allows you to go to a different floor. Or maybe we have soap dispensers or hand sanitizer dispensers that you don't have to touch. You just put your hand under it, you get what you need, you can wash your hands or clean up your hands without touching. Same outcome, we want clean hands, or we want to get to the next level or the level below us, but we use a different way to get there. Okay? And I would call that just what it is, an accommodation of sorts. We can do things like that to just see if there's an impact. The third one would be, there are times when you see a youngster and it's like, he just needs to learn how to do this. What if I coach him on it, explicitly teach him the steps, and we're going to take him through this, then we know he learns what to do. Okay? And that may be enough to address the situation or the concern. In the meantime, we're gathering more information because whatever decisions we make, we need to document them and then their impact. Did it make any difference that we changed Jeff's pattern moving around the building? Yes, no, well, we're not sure. Maybe we should try something else. Or we explicitly taught him how to do this skill and he's getting better at it. Maybe that's all that's needed. There's a question that says, what if there seems to be no rhyme or reason for the behavior and you cannot identify a trigger? I would say you have to keep looking. Again, you want to keep people safe, and if there are those kinds of issues, that's going to rise to the top. But just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Or it may be something that happens so infrequently that we don't notice what that trigger, what that setting event is around that behavior. For example, I had a student that something happened at the same time of year. Only because I worked with him for 5 years did I pick up on that pattern. Because typically in a school year, you only see, you're going to see the student once that time of month or that time of the year, and you may not see all of the rest of that process play out in front of you. But we still have to try to investigate and find out more. It's frustrating and it's challenging, but sometimes that's where we have to start the work and talk to people that know the student. You can do that. So, as I mentioned, on the next slide, you'll see in the IEP system, whatever decision we've made, we need to document that decision, what we're going to do in the short term, and go from there to maybe this is valuable data to use in the future, or didn't get us very far. But again, we have it documented. But if we say, yes, this is a behavior that is impeding the student's learning or others, then we're required to take action. Legally, we're required to take action. The idea hasn't been addressed, the federal law hasn't been addressed in quite some time, Individuals with Disability Education Act, but at some point it will. But until it is, it states the team shall, in the case of a child whose behavior impedes his or her learning or that of others, consider when appropriate strategies, including positive behavior interventions, strategies and supports to address that behavior. So we must do something. And that could be one of several options. We can start down the path of developing a hypothesis and move towards a functional behavior assessment by reviewing data that we already have. We can gather new information, or sometimes, and many times, a team will do both. They'll look at what they have, and then they'll gather some new information and try to determine the why of that behavior. And that's the FBA process that I'm going to let Victor talk a little bit more about right now.
All right. So when we now we're going to move on to the next segment of our process here. And as Elisa mentioned, we're going to conduct an FBA using existing student data. So going back to the IEP process here, right? Provide the case conference rationale for the decision. Why did the case conference decide to complete an FBA? So you'll document that in this area here. And then you're going to describe the situation, the behavior of concern, the moment, using existing data. So I want to just take a brief moment here and just ensure that when we're talking about existing data, right? What is existing data? So this is data that has what's happening from a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago to now, right? What is some of that data? So what does that look like? So maybe—
Hey, Victor, can I clarify, just because I had this conversation with
Sure.
the DOE, the attorneys there, said, someone wanted a definition for existing behavior or existing behavior. Oh, existing data. Wow. And we were told it's information, all the information that exists at the time you make the decision to do this FBA. Mm-hmm. So either it's, when you say this is what we're going to do, you can't gather any more information, new information, unless you decide you're going to do a new, include new data and do it officially. Anything that's in existence at the time you make that decision is existing data. So.
All right. So yeah, so as Elisa just said, right? So that existing data that occurs. So here are some examples of what could be some existing data, right? So we've got maybe some attendance records, some benchmark assessments. Maybe you've got some screeners, some behavioral screeners or reports, maybe some student work samples, discipline referrals, teacher to parent communications, right? And ensuring that, I want to preface before we go on to the next slide, making sure that the parent is an involved team member at this time. Like, we don't want Victor's parents to know, like, what do you mean he's having outbursts in the classroom? We've never heard anything about that. What do you mean there's a what behavior of concern, right? We don't want to get stuck there. So ensuring that there has been, that parent is a part of the process and a part of the communication, and even maybe ensuring that you're talking to the parent. Are you seeing, is Victor behaving this way at home? Are you noticing any different upticks or outbursts, or is Victor, what's it looking like at home, right? So ensuring that the parent is a part of this process. So here are some ideas on what some of that existing data could be. So going back to our, oh man, and it came out a little glitchy here in our presentation, but again, you would document the new data, right? So going back to our buddy Jeff, right? I read some of that, some of the initial review for you guys, and I'm gonna go back to our Padlet here, and going back to our Jeff case study, we have actually some existing data for Jeff, and it's in the form of an ABC kind of a chart, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and open in a new window for you guys to see. So again, we have a brief description of some of the behaviors that Jeff is exhibiting in the classroom, right? So he's cursing, he's threatening his peers. It occurs almost every day, sometimes in multiple classes. And then a little below here, we actually have some existing data, right? So we have an ABC chart that his teachers have filled out, right? So we have two occurrences here. They seem to be on consecutive days. The antecedent event for the first day was a new task was introduced. What happened next was Jeff made some verbal threats. If you don't stop laughing, my fist will meet your face. And what happened afterwards, the consequence was teachers just ignored the problem behavior, right? On the next day, that seems to be interesting. New task was introduced. And then also on the next day, there seems to be a difficult task that Jeff perceived was hard. He ended up disrupting the class by cursing at his peers. And this time, maybe the intensity was a little more because he was removed. And kind of just analyzing the data that we have here, it seems that both last from about a minute to 5 minutes. But, I would probably ask his teachers, what does medium intensity mean? What does that look like, medium intensity? We don't know, right? So that would be worthy of a conversation, right? We're trying to get this FBA to really see what's going on with Jeff, and medium intensity really isn't helping us out here, right? So what are some other observed observations? Again, the antecedent was a new or difficult task. Some of his peers are laughing at him, and some of the consequences or what happens after the behavior is he's being ignored and removed. So again, here we have some existing data for Jeff. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back to our PowerPoint, and this would be collected here in this slide. And this is what it would look like in your IEP process. And again, apologize. Sometimes our PowerPoints look great, and then we go to present, and then it's like boxes on top of others, right? But we would list or describe that new student data that we've collected to reevaluate the student in this. This is what it would look like in your process. Now, this is going to segue us into our next activity that we're going to do. And I'm sure some of you guys are wondering, like, man, we want to make sure that we're really making well-informed decisions for our students like Jeff. So what can we use to collect that data? What data do we want to collect? Maybe there's some questions, as I mentioned earlier. Maybe some of you guys your minds are already going back to Jeff. What does medium intensity look like? And what are those difficult tasks? It appeared both of them happened in the morning. What's happening in the afternoon, right? So I'm sure your brains are going, right? So what we did here is we collected a variety of resources. We have a root cause chart by Margaret Searle. We have DBRs, direct behavior ratings. We have a group interview by Terrence Scott, the data collection decision tree, and data collection methods by Hands in Autism. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our next activity, and we're going to do an individual data collection dive. So you guys are going to have roughly about 10 minutes. I'm going to play about 2 songs, maybe 3, give or take, right? And you can use 2 minutes per resource, or if you want to just dig and dive into 1 or 2 of the resources, maybe already have used one of those resources, however you want to go about it. But as you are skimming through those resources, we want you to consider some of the following. What are some pros and cons of those resources? How might you use a specific tool in your setting? What type of impact could it have in your local practices? And finally, which tool would you use to collect additional data for our buddy Jeff? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to our Padlet and show you where those resources are going to be located. So if you go look at the middle column here, the 3rd column, this is where your data dive resources are going to be located. So if you hover over it, once the little hand appears, it'll allow you to click on it. And again, you can download it directly to your device, or you can open it up in a new window. So here there's little gray scroll tab here. We'll take it down. There's a couple for DBR. And then there's the behavior interview questions, and then the Hands in Autism documents. So again, we're going to give you guys about 5 to 10 minutes in there. It's 9:54 my time, so maybe about 2 songs worth. And then we're going to come back together and kind of see what you're thinking, right? What are some pros and cons? Which would you choose to use for Jeff? As you guys are working through, feel free to start dropping your ideas in the chat box. But again, I'm going to pull up the directions slide here for you. And I'm going to go ahead and play some music. So as you guys are working, again, which tool would you like to use to collect additional data for Jeff? Again, we want to make a really well-informed decision and see what's really going on with Jeff. How can we help him, as Elisa mentioned at the beginning of the PD, right? We want to help Jeff eventually reach that success of working through his school career, right? So what would you do to help him? What tool would you use to collect additional data? What are some pros and cons? and which one would you like to use in your local practice? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start a tune for you guys here. guys, it's 10:04 Central Time. We want to honor the time, so we have about a little under half an hour left. So we're going to go ahead and come back together. And I see Amanda has already typed in some ideas. She likes the DBR booklet, group behavior questions. Everyone needs to be on the same page with the behavior. Absolutely. That's a great resource to have and use. We'll wait about another 30 seconds or so in case anybody wants to share out their ideas. What are some pros and cons? Are you using any tool in your local practice? Which would you like to use for Jeff?
I see the root cause chart.
Mm-hmm. Directly related to specific skill. I agree. Yeah. So I like that resource a lot. I wish I would have had that one when I was TOR. That would have helped me with, again, really directly relating to, is it a specific skill that the student is needs to learn or doesn't know how to use yet? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wait about another 10 seconds, and then we will move on. All right. Thank you guys for sharing. Hopefully you found these resources useful. Hopefully, you could take some of these and again, use them back in your local practice. That was one of our objectives for today, to just kind of expose you to some new tools, some new resources that you may be able to use in your local practices soon, right? So as we're reevaluating and collecting that existing data and completing the FBA, we want to make sure that we have some, in the meantime, supports for our student, for Jeff, right? We want to make sure that we're just not leaving them, high and dry per se, right? So what are some environmental supports that we can put in place to really help Jeff? What are some accommodations, and what are some SDI? What's some specially designed instruction that we can maybe use to help Jeff learn some of these skills, some specific instruction just designed for him to help him maybe, appropriately get his peers' attention or work through some of those difficult tasks that he may be perceiving. So this is what that would look like in the IEP in the program. So you would be able to document those decisions there. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it.
Victor, as you, I know you're going to pass the baton to me again, but that meantime piece is also for being a self-contained ED teacher for so long. That was for me as well. So what do I do with the student while we're collecting other data and while the reevaluation is going on? Can't send them home for the duration. We've got to, I've got to continue to work with them. How are we going to support that student and the staff that work with them in the meantime? So something to consider. And there's still some more good suggestions coming in the chat box as well. But we're gonna move on to the place where the functional behavior assessment is completed, and then what happens. So we're going to dive into an analysis of the data. And what we really want to focus on is, what do we now know? We had some ideas about a behavior concern and what might be happening. We've done a deep dive into looking between academic pieces and behavioral pieces, and maybe we've done some assessments and evaluations. What do we now know that confirms what we thought or changes what we thought? And from this information, we're going to develop a hypothesis of why this behavior. And we can actually have more than one hypothesis. It's possible. Sometimes you have several, and then the team decides, okay, let's start with this one. Maybe we'll reserve the others and come back to them if this one doesn't seem to be giving us the information to support the student that they need. So what I'm going to do is actually, if you wouldn't mind pulling up that FBA analysis format that we've done, the handout with the highlighted sections, because what I'd like to do is just kind of point out to you, I'm not going to read through this whole piece. If we were going to spend a day together, we would do a deep dive into this, and then you'd be creating your own plans based on this. But I just want to make sure that you see from that analysis, we've identified some behavior resources that we're going to, that we used, so that we know where the information came from that we're looking at. We've done a deeper dive into what does the behavior look like. We have teachers that we talk to, and they talk about Jeff's behavior. He's visibly agitated. You can see some of this coming. facial grimace, closes his eyes, frowning, ruffling his hair up a little bit. Teachers also said that they redirected his behavior, but he's never physically harmed anyone. It's always been verbal. That would be important to know. Okay, he hasn't crossed that line yet, and that's a good thing. In addition to that, we have, during an interview that we did with Jeff himself, Jeff was asked about how he feels and how his body feels, and he was able to talk about, I don't hear as good when I feel like I'm exploding inside. Okay, that's good information to know, and rather introspective too, that, that's how it feels to him. Okay, the parents were interviewed. And they talked about the teasing that goes on at home sometimes with the boys, and maybe that's a soft spot. It happens at home, it happens at school, people laugh at him. But that's more information for us to consider. Other things that I pointed out, there was some medical concerns that, we made sure we took a look at that, and there wasn't really anything that was on the record as being a problem. Sensory issues, that nothing surfaced in that area. What conditions do we see this behavior? Okay, there was some information there that maybe when he's doing a reading task, when he's working in a small group, that again is important. Knowing his schedule was equally important to, as we start to think about when and how and where this behavior happens. These are the pieces we can pull out. When is it likely to happen? Okay, and then what are the payoffs for the student? He's able to avoid a task, he's able to avoid a group interaction, and he's able to escape from the demands of a task. These are the pieces that we're now able to pull out of that FBA data and talk about together. And then on the third page, what skills can we now identify as being missing or needing to be practiced? And we've got some ideas: independent reading, requesting assistance, not only asking for help, but accepting help. Those are two different skills, and some kids really struggle with that. Some adults really struggle with that, to be honest. And then this all comes down to our hypothesis of the function of this behavior. Why this behavior? Under these conditions, the student is likely to do this behavior for these reasons. And one of the probably many functions of behavior, reasons that we came up with in this scenario, and again, this is all it is, it's just our, an example. This is not based on a real student in any way. When Jeff is assigned a task involving reading that he believes is too difficult, he becomes verbally aggressive, threatens physical harm towards peers or adults, and leaves his work area to avoid the assigned work. That could be, again, one of many different hypotheses. But once we have a hypothesis, that gives us a focus. That gives us, now all of our resources are going to go towards, okay, this is what we believe is happening and why. So what can we do to mitigate, support, teach, and otherwise address this behavior that's keeping the student from the learning that he needs to have in academic instruction, but also we need to develop his behavioral skills as well. And so this is where we now begin to look at in the progressions, part 2, that whole idea of developing a behavior plan and reshaping the student's learning, being intentional about the environmental changes, planning for explicit instruction, monitoring with fidelity what's happening with the student, and then documenting and reporting that out. And as we think about this plan that we put together, the next slide kind of, it's hard for me to put this to put this in a visual because it seems so descriptive. We got this idea from Carol Koznitsky, who was a consultant we worked with from the East Coast, that talked about, we're getting ready to develop a plan of supports and instruction that includes environmental supports, accommodations, and specially designed instruction. And it's going to be targeted at this individual student. However, as we do that, we want to think about, there will be some pieces that are critical for Jeff, but they're beneficial for all kids and all learners. And so how can we balance out what we need to provide to Jeff and present that in a way that can maybe support other learners as well. Jeff is probably not the only student that needs to learn how to accept help. And the more we can take what he needs specifically and wrap that in what we provide to other students as well, might be a stronger way to reinforce the skills that we want him to have. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we're not going to put this in an IEP and we're just going to do all these things for everyone. No, this is critical instruction that this particular student needs. So it will be in his IEP. We'll have a very clear plan of how we're going to deliver that instruction and where and when and how we progress monitor it. In addition to that, there may be settings and times when we can include other learners, his peers, so that we're normalizing this process and making it just what we do here for learners. Maybe consider it as part of your multi-tiered system of supports for learners, knowing that there are kids that have those tier 3 pieces, but they also get supports all along the way. And so critical for some, beneficial for all. This will be whatever we determine will be written into his plan, and yet others may benefit from it as well. And I'm gonna let Victor kind of talk through the broad strokes of the environmental supports and accommodations, especially design instruction. And then we'll come back to specific pieces that we put into our example of how we might explicitly teach and support Jeff.
Mm-hmm. All right, so talking about environmental supports, and I'm sure some of you guys already use some of these ideas and strategies, but just to kind of give you maybe just to enhance the practice or just tweak it a little bit, but when we're talking about environmental supports, we're looking at how we can really help address, and even going back to Jeff, right? What are some ways that we can help him just support him, right? Support his positive behaviors in time and space and material and his interactions with his peers. So maybe, again, going back to Jeff, maybe he would benefit from pacing of activities, maybe at those difficult tasks that he's perceiving that are kind of, then leading into him having a explosive or an outburst per se, right? Maybe it's frustrating, the pacing of the activity. So what are ways we can just provide some supports? What are some, maybe instead of using words, right? Maybe sometimes for some students, actually hearing a teacher repeatedly give them directives can be frustrating to some. So what are some ways we can maybe have some visuals, some schedules, right? Some other ways to provide those supports for our students, carefully selecting and organizing materials. How about something as and it sounds so redundant, but ensuring that you have those predictable routines, establishing your expectations and ensuring that Jeff and your students know what the day is going to look like can really help them. Teaching, you're structuring the participation in the activities, and maybe even just increasing an understanding of elapsed time, right? So these are just ideas that you can use for your students to just provide them more support in the environment, in the school environment. Here are some more environmental behavioral supports, right? Chunking the work for students, teaching them how to chunk specific tasks, right? Ensuring that we have some regular movement. And I know now virtually, it's such a different world that we're living in, but even having some built-in brain breaks, like I hear my 4th grade son sometimes, like it sounds like there's like a room full of 30 in there, but he's, it sounds, sometimes I want to go in there and join in. It sounds so fun, but just ensuring that we have some regular movement opportunities. How about something like this, right? Teach the use of fidgets or doodling or sketching, but not only for a particular student, for Jeff, but what if there's other students who, perhaps they know that there's that we're doing the study guide. We know that there's a test coming tomorrow. Maybe that brings some angst and anxiety in some. So providing these resources and these supports, not only for Jeff, but as Elisa was mentioning, more of a universal supports for everybody that could benefit from using some fidgets. All students may benefit from having that calming area, take 5s, going through those breathing techniques, and not only being a specific support just for Jeff, but again, they're all students, right? Again, we're trying to be as inclusive as possible, right? And that really goes into that inclusive environment of just giving supports for all students who would benefit from that. Next, we're going to talk about just accommodations, right? So when we talk about our accommodations, we're looking really to provide access to the general education curriculum for our students, but we're not looking to alter the learning goal or the grade level standard. That's when we're modifying. So what are ways that we can provide access to the students by giving them specific little tweaks and accommodations, maybe reducing the number of items a student may complete, but not a change in difficulty. Maybe that's something that will work for Jeff, right? Maybe again, he's perceiving that these tasks are difficult. Maybe instead of having him do all 10 of the same, maybe 5, but again, not changing the learning difficulty. Also looking at time, input and output, showing how the student can learn, right? And especially now using virtual, right? If we're looking to see if Jeff had mastery in I don't know, solving a one-step equation, right? If he's able to speak it or maybe record a video of himself showing you how he solved that equation instead of maybe writing is just, it's frustrating for him. It's taking too long. So again, just looking for ways that we can provide access to the general education curriculum for all of our students. Finally, we talk about specially designed instruction. And in the Padlet, there is a nice document in there that really breaks down specially designed instruction more in depth. It gives you actual ideas, strategies, ways that you can really provide this specially designed instruction for a student, right? So we're looking at what does a student need? What supports can we really provide and help that student with just, having access to the curriculum and really having that individualized instruction, right, for our students. So again, in the Padlet, it elaborates more. That document is in your resources. And I see we got 10 minutes left. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Elisa take us through the next few components of our last few slides, last few parts of our time together.
Okay. So we now know about Jeff. We know we've identified needs. We have a hypothesis of the function of behavior. And it's time for us to think about how to support him. And you have all those types of resources that Victor has mentioned. But now we've got to decide what pieces do we need to address for Jeff. And the question is, what's life-changing? There's so many things, so many skills that we could work on. What do we need to specifically address for Jeff at this time? What's going to be life-changing for him? What's the one skill or the two skills that if we could just get here, that'll give us some momentum to move forward? And that's what the team has to decide, where they're going to work next. And in your materials, you also have a copy of the process of developing Jeff's behavioral goal. And I want to pull that forward. And again, I'm not going to read everything to you, but I want to point out the specific components of how we get to this behavioral goal that we're going to create. We started with the present levels information. We've got lots of information now about this young man, more than we had at the beginning of this process. Jeff knows the terms and meanings of context of his work. His rate of reading and understanding has improved when he knows the meaning of the context and the vocabulary that's around the work he's doing. In the second paragraph, he resists any offers of assistance and doesn't ask for help. Okay, that's important to know. And we have other areas within that, present levels of academic achievement, functional performance, now that can shape the decisions that we're going to make. As you move down the page, we have the grade level expectations and access skills that students should have, need to have, do best when they have in this grade level and at this level of learning. And we can look at some of those Jeff is strong in, some he is not. Focusing on tasks, managing frustration. Now, those are areas that we might want to address because we know that's the expectation at that grade level, but does he own that skill yet? Doesn't seem so. So the team has a lot to decide, okay? When we go into accommodations and needs, and I've highlighted a couple of places there. Again, I'm just kind of pointing out certain pieces that you would want to include and consider. What services or supports, what adjustments may be provided to him? Do we pre-teach vocabulary? We can do that with everybody, but it would be critical for him. Do we teach the whole class processes for requesting help? Those are the global pieces. Then we've got the specially designed instruction pieces. What teaching and learning must take place for Jeff to learn or improve needed access skills? And there's a long list, but what's going to be life-changing for him? Maybe it's how to ask for and accept help, or when and how to self-calm when he gets frustrated. That would be for your team to decide. Once you've made those decisions around where we're going to focus, then we go to the skills we're going to address. And if you slide down that page a little bit more, the goals and objectives, we're going to look at learning content-specific vocabulary. That's going to be a focus because we already know that he does better. We had the percentage 45% better when he understands the context of the vocabulary that he's got to read or work with. So let's write a goal around that. And it has to be a measurable goal that we can work with. There are other skills. Maybe we work on planning for work completion, planning out his work. You want to slide down a little bit more on that last page, page 3. There's a little bit more. There we go. And we've developed a goal around completing work tasks and being given an assignment in a core area, how we're going to build that skill. There could be other potential goals. And at the very bottom of that page, managing frustrations. We could write a goal around that. Ignoring distractions, giving a sustained effort, working until the end of a class period until the task is completed, or participating in a discussion. There are rules and there's give and take in all of those skills that some students don't automatically know. But what we've done, what we've been able to do through this process of developing an FBA is fine-tune the areas that are weaker or the skills that need to be built up for this particular student. And then we can address those through specially designed instruction, through environmental supports, through accommodations to allow him to be more successful. And success begets success. There's a positive correlation. And so we can grow the student in a positive way by honing in on the specific areas that are critical to his learning and his development. And so what we would ask you, if we were going to be spending the afternoon together, we would be asking you to actually select a skill builder that you would want to work towards with Jeff. And if you want to go back to the slides, because I'm going to challenge you, actually we're going to challenge you to this. There's several activities that you can do. And if you want to share your work with us, we would love that. But choose one of these kind of take-home assignments. Generate a list of questions you have about this process, and then send those to us so that we can post your questions and your answers in the Padlet. Identify at least 4 environmental supports that you might implement to support Jeff's skills. Again, share those with us. We can post those on the Padlet. Based on the available data, maybe you draft another goal statement for Jeff, or develop another means of progress monitoring, one of the goal examples that we gave. So this is a chance for you to kind of take what you've learned and do something with it and share it back with us. I also want to let you know that on the 23rd of this month, Friday, October 23rd, we have a work session around behavior intervention plans and writing goals for them. So if you'd like to join us, if you have an opportunity to join us or want to send us your questions, we'd be happy to address those more in detail and work with you on some of that. So we've got just a couple minutes left. Wow, the time goes. But if you have questions now that you want to leave with us, or if you want to stay on a few minutes after, I know this is the end of the session formally, but if you've got a little bit of time and want to stay and ask a question, you can drop those into the chat. We appreciate whatever feedback you have for us. Here, as far as wrapping up, we had 2 things that we wanted to do to move through the process, which we've done. The biggest piece of the process is what you do next in developing your plan. So please keep that in mind, and we want to connect with you again to do those things. But then we also put a lot of resources into your hands and digest some of those. Again, ask some questions. If you need anything more, or if you want to find something more in detail, again, let us know. Our contact information is at the end of the document here that's on the screen. There is an evaluation that we would love to have your feedback. There's never enough time to go through everything, but we'd love to have your feedback. And that's available through the link that's on the screen. And you just put in, you can look for the date and the name of our session and provide us with that feedback. And anything else to wrap things up, Victor?
There is a question. Moved past me too quick. There's a question from Laura on, she says, I know it is already in the section. I guess my question is, would I use that form and upload it when it asks if I was done or not? Does that make sense? If I would.
No. Okay, she's talking about the section, the analysis section. That's a part, that's what happens at a case conference. You know, there should be a conference meeting after you have all of your data, and that's where you would record that information. It wouldn't be something that one person does or that you do outside of, you didn't have to do it outside of the system. It would be, we're having a discussion about all these things that we've now learned, and the statements there should guide you through the process. So you wouldn't need to upload anything, you know, specifically, unless you had additional data, because the evaluation itself is already in the students' IEP files electronically. This would just be our discussion, which leads to our hypothesis, which leads to the behavioral goals that we will write. Laura, I hope that makes sense to you. Okay, great.
Drop the link. Hopefully this one. It's saying it's not, you may have to just copy and paste the evaluation link in your URL. I just grabbed it from the PowerPoint and it didn't, it's not coming up as a hyperlink, sorry.
And you'll also get an email that has this link in it as in addition after the session is over. Yep. We'll send, I think we send it out twice. Is that what happens? Right away, and then a day or two later you'll get it again as a reminder. But thank you so much for being a part of this time, and we hope we've given you some resources you can start to work with. You know how to get to us. There's our contact information, and we look to hear from you. This is a task that's better done with the team, and we'd love to be a part of the team if we can help you.
We've got a couple of questions here. I'm going to try and answer some and pass some along. So Katie wanted to know, I jumped on link, can you guide me through the data resources? So using the Padlet, the third column has the data dive resources. So these are resources that you can use to collect new and additional data for your students. So they're in the third column here. There are 4 resources, root cause charts, there's the direct behavior rating, and then if you hover over each resource, you'll see like the hand. If you click on that hand, it'll give you an opportunity to directly download to your desktop or your laptop, or you can click to open in a new window. So there are your data dive resources, Katie. So they're in the third column. You can scroll down using this darker gray kind of toggle there, and the behavior interview questions, and the final 2 are the Hands in Autism documents. So let's see if we got any other questions. I thought I saw another one. So that
I was trying to look back too.
Yeah. Somebody said, thank you so much. We're happy to hear that it's definitely applicable to your environment. Awesome. Catherine, are there any videos that help us write IEPs? So I'm going to pull up. Yeah, one of our colleagues, Matt, does a IEP walkthrough, but he also shared with me that I recently shared with another district. He has a kind of like a YouTube video walkthrough where he goes through writing annual goals and also through progress monitoring. So when I put my email back up, write it down and shoot me an email, and I can send you those links so you could check those out. And then you also,
is that something we could put in the Padlet too, so that, you know, on
oh yeah, I can put that
page
in
of the other resources or something?
Yeah, let me make a note so I don't forget other resources. She's also got another question, Elisa. Also, my district told us we have to give parents at least 10-day notice in order to hold a case conference. But sometimes my parents want to hold it in 2 days. Is this a state directive or district directive?
The parents just need to have prior notice of, if you want to have a conference. That sounds like it's a district policy.
Mhm.
10-day notice to hold the case conference. No, most of the 10-day timelines come on the other end of, when you have 10 days to develop it, and if it's not completed at the end of the conference and so on, and 10 days for the parent to have it and review it and respond back. But that sounds like a district policy,
Yeah.
which can, that's
Mhm.
a couple new messages down towards the bottom.
Emily asks, have you ever struggled to have the team members all on the same page?
Absolutely.
Do you have any guidance about helping everyone stay focused on what is best for the student?
It's really pulling people back to it, that, this is about the student. This isn't personal as much as it feels personal sometimes to us. This is about teaching and learning. If we had a student struggling with reading, we would be putting our heads together to come up with strategies and how to help this youngster get what they needed to be able to become a stronger reader.
Mm-hmm.
Behavior is personal. It feels personal, and sometimes that makes a difference. But it's a skill that you have to learn, like any other academic skill, to be absolutely honest.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes explicitly breaking it down. Wish there was an easy answer.
Yeah, I
And if you find it, let us know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
I gotta
thank
agree
you.
with you. Yeah, that's it's a hard one, man. But I think, like Elisa said, going back to that initial slide, right? Like, what can we do to help Jeff? Let's say he's a middle, 7th grade student, like not just now in October, but thinking about 5 years down the line when he's a senior. What can we do to help him reach that moment where he's successful and he's ready to go into a career or a trade? You know what I mean? Like, how can we help him achieve those social skills or learning skills that may be of deficit for right now? One last thing before we sign off, there's a new, we know that some of you guys may be watching with a group instead of, in your local building. So if you, and we hope everybody registered, but if you did not register, one person from your group, email our colleague Gail Ringwalt, here's her email, and give her the name and the email addresses of each attendee, and so that way you guys can receive a certificate of attendance. So I'm going to go ahead and put her email in the chat box, because we know that some of you guys may be meeting with, maybe watching with a group of colleagues. So, one of you guys go ahead and email her your names and your emails, and that way she can get the certificate of attendance to you guys. So
Great.
I will give about another 30 seconds here, see if somebody else has a question. Here's our contact information on the screen again. And again, like Elisa mentioned, on, is it Friday, October 23rd? We'll have a work session there. So feel free to email us some questions and attend, and we'll try and help you work through some of your processes and struggles. And, we've been there. So I feel you guys, definitely.
We may not be able to fix it, but we can walk alongside you while you're working on it.
Right.
And there is safety in numbers.
Right.
The team is good.
Right. Awesome. Well, I see Amanda says, thank you. So you guys, thank you so much for taking time to, spend some time with us today. And hopefully you found this beneficial of your time, and you can take some of these resources back to your practices, and feel free to reach out. And you guys have a good rest of your week.
Yeah, be safe, be well, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. You guys take care. Have a good one.